richest towns in America at one time. And this is right in this area. This is St. Peter's Episcopal Church, of course, back in that parking lot.
Sam, I'm just saying, nothing. Oh, sorry. Oh, it's okay.
Nathaniel Bowditch was baptized here. That guy goes on to change world history. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Nathaniel Bowditch, but he went to sea in an early age as a supercargo, basically an accountant taking care of all the things. He watches the captains navigate. He's a mathematical whiz. It's not long before he's teaching everybody on the boat how to navigate. By 1803, he has found 5,000 mistakes in the British practical navigator. 5,000 mistakes. In fact, he actually found over 5,000 mistakes. He writes another book called The New American Practical Navigator. It is released in 1803. It drives American boats, ships, the maritime industry to new heights because of the simple fact that we know where the mistakes are. We get there sooner, we get there safer. We have changed navigation. So this is when America becomes one of the premier naval powers in the world. Remember, England was the power. They had a navy of over 1,000 ships. But the American merchant fleet travels all over the world. And this town was on the leading edge of that. This is the first town in America to ever trade with St. Petersburg, Russia, Japan, or any of these places in the Far East like India and China. So it's an interesting thing. But we're here to talk about ghosts. We're here to talk about pain and torture. So let's get right to it. This was known as Prisoner's Row right in here. And it was simply because, well, at one time, the old witch jail was over here, where that building stands today. In fact, they found the timbers and the foundation of it when they were digging the foundation of this building back in the 50s. Anytime we have a catastrophe in Salem, there's somehow or another, people see this man walking around, an apparition in that area. And in 1914, numerous people reported a man walking through the cemetery, and they could not figure out who it was. Well, a few days later, the terrible fire of Salem happened. It started in Blubber Hollow over in that direction, and, well, it burnt down about 60% of the town. So they say his apparition is a harbinger of doom, or bad things to come. Now, we can also look down at the end of this street down here, and that's just beyond that is the North River. And that's where the old Parker Brothers factory used to be, and that's where John Winthrop came up the river in 1630 with Arbello and about 5 to 6 other ships and 1,000 Puritans. And of course, John Winthrop is the founder of Boston. So it all starts here in Salem, and these witch trials are pretty interesting. If you guys, we got time enough because we've got such a small crew. If you want to walk over there and look at the cemetery and take some shots, and then we'll move on. You're beginning to see how small Salem town is. Once again, I reiterate that the village was huge. It was as big as Essex County. And a lot of these people lived in what is known as Danvers. We'll talk about Rebecca Nurse, who was in the, she had a farm out in Danvers. You see gals out there? I don't see anybody out there. Good, let's get out of here. So if we go back in 1692, use your imagination a little bit, we see the end of an apple orchard that belonged to Bridget Bishop. Bridget Bishop was the first woman executed for witchcraft. And she had every right to be because she was burned. Yeah. She was on her third marriage. Yeah. And she'd already been tried for witchcraft one time before. Her second husband, Thomas Oliver, fell off the roof. And she gets it all. Yeah, she gets all the farm, everything. This upsets her too stepchildren who are almost the same age as Bridget's, to this man. And she's accused of witchcraft. She's taken to the town square, to the townhouse, and she's tried, and she's found not guilty. But her children accused her of witchcraft because they were not going to inherit any land, and they knew if she was out of the picture, they could get the land that their father owned, but Bridget ends up with it. Well, she works on her third marriage. She ends up marrying a bolt upright Puritan who happens to be a member of the church. His name is Bishop, and he owns a sawmill over in Beverly. The Americans are thinking of themselves as the new Greeks in the early 1800s, so they established themselves at the Lyceum to exchange ideas. And some of the people that have spoken here are pretty important. Frederick Douglass has given a speech here. Ralph Waldo Emerson has given lectures here. Thoreau has given lectures here. And what I find more amazing and more magical and mystical than any of this stuff is that the first long-distance phone call was made from this very building in February of 1877 by none other than Alexander Graham Bell. So this is pretty much an eventful place for things to happen. And Bridget has been disturbed for a long time. In fact, when this was the Lyceum Restaurant, that was the banquet hall upstairs, they set up the entire banquet hall for a group of people, and then the waiters and the waitresses and everybody went downstairs to take a break. There was no one upstairs. When they returned, the chairs are out of place, the plates are off the table. It looks like someone very disturbed came through the room. Another thing that's unusual here, and I used to come here quite often when it was, well, they had good bartenders. But anyway, they never had apples on the menu. They never even had apple schnapps behind the bar. But people always talked about the smell of apples sometimes in there. Then the History Channel shows up a few years back and actually obtains a recorded voice phenomena of Bridget Bishop, because this place is known to be haunted. And it is true. Now, I don't know how much you know about recorded voice phenomena. There's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts about it. But they have it. And they ask her, what is your name? And of course, she said Bridget Bishop. I'm sure it didn't sound like that. I haven't heard of it. Bridget Bishop. And then how did she die? And how did you die? I was hanged. So she's often seen, or a silhouette of a woman is often seen in this window. This is pretty significant latitude and longitude because you're not very far from the old town square. And these buildings represent the warehouses. If you go down to the National Maritime Site, you'll be able to see this just as it was to a certain degree. You'll see the Friendship, and that old warehouse actually came from Marblehead. They moved it over. It goes back to the 1700s. So we're crossing. Joshua Ward House is up there with the picket fence and the gate, and who knows? I know that it's the Higginson Book Company, and that there's nobody in there usually after about 7 o'clock at night. We've made mistakes. We're sorry about it. Cotton Mather was not one of them, and neither was John Hathorne. Hathorne felt he did the right thing, even though he was responsible for signing the warrants of 20 people, 1 pressed to death, 19 hanged. He thought he had never done a wrong thing. He said those people were guilty of witchcraft. He honestly believed that. And this embarrassed Nathaniel Hawthorne to the point that he slipped a W into his name to disassociate himself from his great-great-grandfather. Hathorne is here, and if you're over here tomorrow, you can walk right over there. There's a map, a bronze map right there, but he's not far. He's right over there. And Governor Simon Bradstreet is over this way. You can recognize his crypt easily because it is a crypt and it's a big plaque on it. And, Bradstreet, of course, is a governor, one of our first governors and one of our oldest. Benjamin Lynn. Any of you know who he was? Have any clue? He was the judge at the Boston Massacre trial. All of those people that were tried for the Boston Massacre were tried by colonists that were born here. So it looks like all of them would hang. Those 7 British soldiers, they killed 5 people in the Boston area, right there in front of the old state house. And they go on trial for their life. They don't Baptized.